Hello everybody, and thanks for coming and hanging out here to ask questions about 3D and Cinema 4D and motion graphics and maybe some special effects. Who knows what we're going to do. How's everyone doing? Sound is good, video's good. Hello YouTube, hello Twitch. How is everyone on this fine Wednesday? Doing very well, I hope. So let's see, any news items to cover? Well, first of all, here, I'll just full screen up the show. I've been continuing on the bonus streams to work on this gem collection, which is going to become available on Patreon sooner than later, although I think we might have just created the final one of the gems. We've got 12 different gems here, and I'm going to be making a bunch of materials, hopefully, to go along with it. We've already got a ruby and a sapphire and an emerald in addition to diamond, and I hope to make a few others. And I'm going to explore some possibilities of getting like internal geometry, like little fractures, and maybe being able to do something like an opal. A lot of gems look kind of cool because of an internal structure, so I'm going to do some exploration along those lines. But if you want to follow along with this or see past replays, you can join and follow on Patreon and get to check out all of this stuff. We've actually been doing almost a different modeling technique on every single one of them, just as I continue to explore and try and find better and faster ways of being able to build this type of thing. But like I said, from here on out, it's probably mostly going to be materials, although I have it in my head. I'm not sure if I'll do it for sure or not, but we've been basing all these different cuts. I've been learning a whole bunch of stuff about the way gemstones are cut, and you know, there's popular cuts and whatnot, but then there's tons and tons of just made up ones where it's like, oh, here's just a person who makes up a bunch. So I thought it might be cool to make up like a rocket lasso gemstone. So that's an idea I have. We'll see how that goes. So that's that. And then, I think almost, well, if everything goes well, who knows, something might delay it. But if all goes well, then the next Rocket Lasso plugin is going to be releasing in 2 weeks. So keep an eye out for that. I've got a link to the newsletter below, and that's going to be a good way to get information on it. But in addition to that, I'm going to be doing a live stream about it. There'll be a bunch of videos and the commercial for it and everything. So working really hard on that. I've been doing so much rendering. It's kind of cool. I've been learning a bunch more about rendering and Redshift and doing some kit bashing type things. And I've been learning a bunch along those lines. I've also been playing with reality capture a little bit, which is a software to do photogrammetry, take a bunch of different photos and then bring it into the software, and it's really robust. I really like it. So I'm going to be playing with that more, so maybe there'll be some projects involving that, maybe a tutorial about using it and doing some Cinema 4D workflow with it. That's been really, really fun. So everybody start getting those questions together. Questions. I need to see the artist or the studio who made it. If you're posting a link, if it's not a link, then just type out a question. Make sure it's kind of calling my attention to it a little bit, like type Chris in all caps or something. I tend to see them. If I don't get to your question and I'm wrapping up one, then feel free to repost it again. Just don't go spamming, but it's fine to repost it again after we've moved on. Call out the effect or a specific time code, but other than that, it's all good. We can try and tackle lots of different things today. That's the plan anyway. I think my microphone stand isn't tight enough and it's slowly sinking down. That should do it. So let's close up that Redshift window and then start tackling some of these questions. So yeah, we got people all over the chat. We've already got a bunch of questions popping in. So let's see what we got first. I'll share the screen immediately so I don't forget. And I like the title here. How about some Voronoi Trickery? So let's see what we've got here. Ooh. Let's see what we've got. That's definitely some Voronoi type trickery. I've already got an idea of how we might be able to tackle it. This is from Buck You Back, and I feel like we might have seen it. Now they're saying it's interesting how a mathematical animation could behave so lifelike. And it says processing, so this probably has nothing to do with 3D specifically, but we can do some stuff in 3D. I just want to see what other kind of work they do. So yeah, well, 3D in general, so presumably maybe that's not just mathematical, it could be fully 3D, because they seem to have a background in it. I think we might have tackled a question from them before, but... Oh, is it just Buck? Is there... If this is Buck, I was making a mistake. Buck You Back, I thought that was like a completely unrelated thing, but that just might be Buck, which obviously they do amazing things. So, sorry for the lack of clarity there, but that's an excellent question to pop in. Oh, and as we're going, Intelligent Machine's asking, have I messed with Unreal Engine 5? I haven't, but I have been watching a bunch of the videos and seeing like the new features and things that it's capable of, and it's pretty cool. But I've been too busy working on. Come on, don't make a new material, make a new file. Too busy getting the new plugin ready to launch to go into that for now. But in any case, I'm trying to think of a way. How can we twist this idea a little bit? Geometry-wise, yeah, we'll just play and then see where we end up. Just to make the base shape a little bit different, won't be terribly different. We'll make a disc shape, and we'll give it a radius of 1,000, and B, you see the subdivisions, and just make it a little rounder with 48 subdivision going around. Now, we need to, the way we're going to do this is by, I guess we might be able to do it with particles, although I'm inclined to do it with a cloner. Let's see what happens if we do it with particles. Now, to start out with, taking this disk and throwing it into a Voronoi Fracture should break it apart so we get these individual pieces, and that can just be the starting shape. Of course, those won't move if we do it that way, but let's just start out with it having a bit of a shape like that. And then, is it possible? Yeah, this should be fine to do it. We don't use it very often, but let's use the old cinema emitter, drop in a cube, and you can keyframe things with the cinema emitter, but they I can't remember the way they specifically do it, where they sort of like match the timeline. I will set, our current frame rate is 30, so I'll set the bit rate, or the birth rate rather, to 30 as well. And I'd like this to be pretty small, so 10 by 10 by 10. And we might run into a couple different issues here, but let's just find out what happens. So if I make that cube dynamic, simulation, rigid body, and we'll make this disk shape, I'll actually make a duplicate of it, hide it, and that can be our collider. Let's say collide. And make it also dynamic. Rigging, simulation, collider body. Then as this is generating particles, if we tell these to be shown, then you'll see those will immediately fall into the ground, which is just fine. That's what we want. Moving this into the air a bit, rotating 90 degrees so they aim down, and making it a size of 0 by 0. Then they should just create one per frame, and it should just fall down onto the ground. You'll see they'll start piling up. That's just fun. What we need to see right away is, does the Voronoi Fracture see these particles as a source? Because my assumption is that it's going to see the particles as a source, but not the dynamic cubes. So dragging this in. Oh, maybe it does see the dynamic cubes. That's going to make this pretty simple. Oh, no. We hit play. It doesn't like it. So possibly we could bake that out. But I don't, that's not super encouraging. Also, turning them transparent for some reason. That's strange. Did it turn it transparent once I dropped them into the emitter? Yeah, that's weird. The Voronoi Fracture somehow is turning those semi-transparent. Okay, so some things to attempt. First of all, what if we make a matrix and tell this matrix to copy onto an object, and that object is the emitter? Does that properly see the particles that are dynamic, or does it travel straight down? It's one of those tricky ones where you see when I hit pause and I do a refresh, it does appear properly. So that gets tricky for seeing it in the viewport. I want this to create one per axis, and now you can see there's a matrix on each one of those. Hitting play, once again, those are not moving off to the side, but if I refresh it properly, it seems to. That might be more consistent. I will, as a test, drop that matrix into the fracture, move the fracture afterward as well, just so everything's calculating in the proper order. And let's see if that, once I pause, it does, you see it does seem to generate those. I want to see if it actually does, so I'll render this out. In order to do that, the easiest way to see this is just put a little gap in between everything, because when we hit render, obviously these, oh, actually, colors do come through in the render. I didn't think that those did, but I guess without a material on it, the colors come through, but that's helpful. So Output, let's just do 1080 by 1080. We don't need too many frames here, so just hit all frames. Don't worry about saving. Just let that whip out a bunch of frames really quick, and we'll see what we get. This does seem to be okay. It does work when we hit render, which is an important variable here. It just sucks that we're not going to get perfect real-time feedback in the viewport, but it's doing something for us. So, all right. Now, a few more steps. Like I said, you can keyframe things inside of an emitter. I just haven't done it in like literally years and years and years. So what I'd like is, let's say at frame 30 that they've scaled up to this 10 by 10 by 10. And at the very beginning, I don't want to go to 0, so let's just say 0.01, so essentially all but 0. I'm going to keyframe those. Now let's see if they individually are scaling up. Yeah, okay, yeah, as they're born, it's working exactly as I was hoping it would. As they're born, it's a little bit hard to see, so I'll move the emitter up into the air, and temporarily we'll turn off that matrix. You'll see that the individual cubes are really tiny, and then they will continue growing. Each new one is still tiny, so that is working fine. I guess, oh, that's just the way they're going to behave dynamically. So the matrix is purely positional. So that actually just works well for us overall. Let's turn off that built-in source. So we'll just temporarily turn it off. Maybe we'll want it again. Hitting play. Once again, it will refresh. What I'd like is, currently I did cubes because they're very low poly. But what I'd like to do is them not to be treated as cubes, but instead be treated as, let's see, no bounce. No friction. I want them to freely slide past each other. What I would like is, as a collision, I don't want them to be automatically choosing the shape, which is probably doing something like a box. I'd like them to be treated as spheres, so I'll turn on ellipsoid, which should mean they are free to roll around. So they'll probably start shooting off to the side really quickly. Yeah, you see them just start rolling around. Ignore the blinking. I guess photosensitivity warning for anybody. You see those start moving around. They won't actually physically roll, but they're behaving like spheres and moving around. Actually, with no friction, they might roll. I am curious, if we add a little bit of friction in there, do they roll? Yeah, so you see here now that they are rolling. The rolling doesn't matter, but with zero friction, there's no ground to catch the side of it, and thus it doesn't roll. They just slide out of the way. It doesn't make a difference, but that's a thing. All right, now they're shooting off to the side really quickly, but what I think I would like to do is just drain the energy out. A couple different ways we can drain the energy out here. The first one is going to our linear damping and jump that up to something really high, like 99. Let's see if this does anything for us. So this is constantly draining energy out from the system, which actually seems to be working better than I thought it would. We will temporarily turn off the fracture, just so we're not getting the blinking. I'd like a lot more frames, 999. Oh, and this will probably stop emitting, so let's just say stop emitting with a bunch of zeros, so essentially forever. Now hitting play. As all of these fall down, we have smaller cubes constantly pushing and fighting their way down through the middle, and then pushing all the other ones out of the way. That's the idea here. And as those are pushing everything out of the way, if we were to turn on our fracture and hide the emitter, then now you can see every single individual one is creating a new fracture point. So now we have a pretty straightforward rig in which to generate all the cuts that we want. Just for speed purposes, I will get rid of that because we can see it pretty clearly. And so we don't see the polygons, we do see the individual colors. The emitter does not need to be on the ground. Just for, I guess, a bit of contrast, I'll drop that to 0 on height. Grab the disk collider and the actual fracture, move them down, I guess, -5, because the block eventually becomes 5, but it'll generate as smaller than that. And on the emitter, right click, animation, vibrate tag, and we'll just get some random motion from here. So a random position at a slow speed, 0.2, moving outward up to 500, not on Y. So the hope here is that this is just going to drift around, constantly generating spheres. And let's go and look at our actual result and turn off the fracture for a moment. Let's see what we get. They seem to be falling through the floor. I'm not sure. Yeah, they're falling through the floor because I thought I moved the collider -5. The emitter is at 0, but And let's say a speed of 0. They don't need any speed when they're born. It might be, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they're so tiny at that step that they're escaping through the floor. Let me think. What would be the best way to make sure they don't go through the floor? Well, the best way actually is a really straightforward one. We should have done this right away by getting, let's get rid of, well, let's create a floor. So that was a infinite floor and nothing can sneak through the floor. I'll move the dynamics tag up to that and we can get rid of that invisible disk that was doing all of the colliding for us. And if the floor is at -5, that might automatically just work for us. Yes, indeed it does. All right, so now what should happen is we're going to get a giant trail of these constantly generating, and even if it passes through itself, the new one will generate and just push the other ones out of the way. So this effect, even just by itself visually, I think is probably going to be pretty cool, where these can just fill in their space. We could allow them to move more by having less energy drain, but I think we do want the energy drain. It would probably be a good idea as well to crank up the gravity just a bit. Control D, dynamics, gravity, I'll say 10 times stronger. They really can't get through the floor, and this is just going to make sure that they don't want to stack up on top of each other. So that will continue generating. Now, the more that we have, the slower it will go. However, I think it would be a good idea if we had an existing set of them everywhere, just so that we have a baseline. So, and especially if we're trying to emulate that effect that we saw. So I'll make a duplicate of that cube. I would like it to be full size. So in the beginning of this cube, I'll kill off these keyframes, holding Control and Shift as I click, erasing out both. That can go into a regular cloner. And yeah, we have to do it this way via a cloner and not just a straight matrix. Because, let's see how many. Let's say 44 by 44. It's quite a bit. Oop, and it should be 1 by 44. There, so we get this giant grid. They're 10 units across, so let's say 13 by 13. So we get this grid of them. So I need these to be here and be dynamic so that they're just sitting there on the ground waiting to be moved out of the way. Now that I've done that, I can make a second matrix, and this matrix will reference this one, and it's also set to axis. And then the Voronoi Fracture can see the second matrix as an additional source, and I don't think we need that original random one. So this one will be matrix.cloner, and this one will be matrix.emitter. So now we've got 2 of those, and they should both be dynamic and like 2 identical systems for all purposes. So as those should just be static. I want these to, I think they re-wake up, so I think it's fine if they fall asleep. I should also save the file because I haven't done that yet. Episode 17, scene files, 1A, we'll say cell growth effect. All right, so we were just very clean, very meticulous with the way we put everything together. Hitting play, we were hiding the matrix so we can just see the original clones collide with each other. We've lost quite a bit of speed just because of how many collisions there are. It might speed up as they all fall asleep, but it doesn't look like it's falling asleep too much. But everything should scale up, and you can now see it's kind of disturbing that natural pattern that was there originally. I wonder if we'd want to... These are just pushing... there's additional things we could do where possibly we'd want each of these to continue growing upwards so they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But now that I think about it, that might be a bad idea. Pausing this, let's take a look at the fracture, which at this point it's a disc shape. I see no reason to have the extra polygons. So I'll drop it to 4 and just make sure the radius is large enough for us to see it off to infinity. All right, turning on the fracture and hiding our emitters, we can now see this very regular pattern that we have, and then the introduction of, you know, a new pattern as those get created. And let's make it look a little bit more cellular. What's the best way to do it? I mean, we've got a lot of different options. I suppose let's put it in Redshift. We don't end up going in Redshift too often, so immediately I shall save the file again. I am hitting Control Shift S. There, now it finally pops up. Sometimes I think I click the keys too quickly. underscore RS for Redshift. And I suppose that will be 1B. All right. Inside, yeah, we'll do Redshift, Control B. Change the renderer to Redshift. We've got the new basic tab that we can set the basic parameters here. And it's nice to, oh, that's the overall setting. Although we can go to advanced, and this is automatic sampling. So jumping this up to like 0.1 instead of 0.01 should render relatively quickly for what we're doing here. A nice overall, actually, I guess it'll just light everything right out of the box. There won't be much to see until I create a Redshift material. In said material, it will just go onto the fracture. Let's make sure that the floor doesn't render. I don't think it would, but I don't want it to. I don't want any of those to render either. Inside that Redshift material, we'll use the old school one for now. I would like to keep this really simple. Actually, we'll keep it as simple as possible. Let's just search for the word wire and grab the wireframe and output that to the surface. So I'm not even plugging into the material. I'm just saying, hey, give me this absolute out. So with that there, let's say Redshift render view, hit play. And there, oh, dang it, the wireframe is rendering n-gons, and I don't think there's a setting to stop that. Oh, show hidden edges. There's very few settings, but one of the settings might... Oop, I didn't mean to send the picture viewer, but that is fine. Let me just see it here in the render view. Come on, work. No. That's fine. That's fine because let's get rid of the wireframe. Instead, output the overall material, and I'll just make it luminant, so not worrying about color or reflection. Overall emission of 1, and it's white. And then in the Voronoi Fracture, putting in that offset again. Doesn't need to be much, 2.2. 0.5, is it that small? Yeah. So now, Redshift, go. Yeah, okay, so that looks nice. Nothing terribly fancy. I think we can make that a little skinnier. Oops, what did I do? We don't need to output that quite so much. Or, I'm sorry, offset this quite so much. 0.1 even, just get nice smooth lines. Save, and it's interesting that the this emitter is randomly starting so far out from 0. I wonder if I could zero it out into 1. Yeah, it still goes to an offset, but that's fine. That's just fine. All right, and I think we're still outputting. We're going to lose the frames, so I'll say divided by lock ratio divided by 2. And now output that. So we have a little bit of perspective here, and that should allocate. Let me know if the render starts running a little bit slow, but let's just get what the overall effect ends up looking like here. And sorry, not render. If not the render slow, let me know if it lags because we're doing a lot here. Now I'm curious exactly what's happening here. Maybe that jumped? Why is there one off one there? Well, that's not going the quickest, but it does seem to be more about the geometry than anything. So I'd like to, let's see if we just go 1 frame forward. Yeah, the first one wasn't there, but I think it's as I rewound, you see it suddenly jumped from one spot to another. It seems to be 1 frame of lag from the emitter. That does translate over into the renderer, so that first frame's kind of a bad frame. And I guess it's good that we didn't go with the color, because every time we generate another one of these, you can see that the entire pattern is offsetting by that one little amount. Actually, something I didn't even think about, that it's going to be super easy to fix, but we should be able to see pretty rapidly here. I should put bigger gap here so you can see it better in the live stream. But I think each of these chunks is going to, well, I guess it's doing an all right job, but it's just full scale right away. So the new pieces are going to appear and sort of block, they're going to pop into existence really quickly. Where if we had a big old field of these and I dropped them from above, then those will still push its neighbors out of the way. But if it's not doing too bad of a job right now, which it seems to be doing all right, then I don't really have a problem with it. Maybe they're small enough that it works, but I just don't know for sure if that works one way or the other. Let's see if they, I don't see any there just popping into existence. Now it's interesting because immediately these are starting to push all the other ones out of the way, and you can see that even further down the line that these are starting to get knocked out of alignment. I will set the offset larger so on the next iteration of the render we can see it more clearly. I expect some of them to be relatively small, but we'll just see. Let's see. I'm just seeing in the chat if anybody has any suggestions. Trey's, are you talking about why are we in Redshift? No, I'm just doing it for fun. We always do Redshift, but we're not doing anything fancy here. We could have just set up a basic outline, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to do Redshift, especially since I've been doing so much Redshift in my renders for the upcoming plugin. Yeah, that's actually working pretty well. It's not running as quick as I would hope, and I don't know how much of that is the renderer, but a couple things I would like to do. I'm going to turn that off. We've got the new wider version. I'd like these to get spit. Let me think. In order to speed up overall, I'll decrease this grid a bit. We'll put more spacing in between and drop it to 33 by 33, which is significantly fewer. The emitter, I'll have it double its amount, so it's going to create 2 every frame, which should be fine. That's going to be drifting around just fine, although moving it slower could be nice because it'll pile up more, so I will slow this down to half that speed, 0.1. Rewind a few times just to make sure that's in the proper beginning spot, and that way you don't get that one extra one that jumps over. And keep in mind, we don't technically have to create this grid ahead of time, but I think it's kind of neat to see them react with each other. And I'll just hit save again on that. And oh, I was going to, with it being wider, I feel confident in raising up the threshold in Redshift another order of magnitude, which could start looking a little fuzzy on the edges, but since we're just seeing these lines, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Let's see if we're, well, we're definitely quicker. So we'll give that a few frames as we go. Does anybody have any suggestions or ideas of things they'd like to see this effect do as we're playing with it? I do feel like they're so, well, let's see how it looks as they move away. We'll give it a few frames and I'll judge if I should pull it up in the air and push it away or not. Because right now I'm not sure. Because there's a couple different approaches to take on that. Now, and I'll talk through them as we do them. Now it does create this overall shape. We could easily give this thickness. In fact, the Voronoi Fracture by itself, you can turn on, is it, let's see if it works. Hull only, and then give it a thickness of 5. Does that work? Apparently that doesn't work. This might be the wrong type of shell. But we can easily give that thickness through a Voronoi Fracture. Those should all move. We could bevel things. What pattern might I want to give? And we definitely put on some crazy materials if we were so inclined. Let's see how the growth looks. Oh, it does start looking better as we give it a few extra frames to begin spreading out. And like I said, like this grid that we already put out there, that doesn't have to be there. These could just be doing their initial break. The problem is that they'll look really crazy on the edges because you'll essentially get these lines that shoot out to infinity on the edge, and this having this extra grid around prevents that. It looks like the, I'm fine with it, but the vibrate tag, like you always have to go easy on the numbers on a vibrate tag because you see even right now it's even cutting it in half, it's relatively quickly traveling around as it's generating the new ones, and I think it'd be kind of nice if it was piling up in one given spot for a little bit longer. But the growth pattern there is not terrible. It doesn't look too good zoomed up. Blip, 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 blip. I wasn't thinking about it, but you know, in theory, we could also, these could have different random, they could have different random sizes. The matrix is cloning onto the axis, which I don't think has anything to do with the overall scale. It might take on the properties of the scale if we let the emitter make the changes. So I will save this as where it currently is, doing what it's doing, and then save a new version. And the new version, I'll move. I want to drop them from the air. Now, the vibrate tag I don't think has anything to do with the Y parameter. So pulling this not terribly far. Let's just do 20 units in the air, hit apply, and now it's up in the air and it's going to do the same movement. Then this emitter doesn't, or these cubes don't need to grow into their final size. So jumping to a future frame. Maybe it was a bad idea. I didn't think the emitter, I thought it was safe to jump to a future frame because the emitter wouldn't generate, but maybe the emitter does try and generate, so that's bad. I mean, I just saved a new version. I might have to force quit. Oh, nope, it woke up. Nice. Okay, that could have been dangerous, though. Anyway, that was just to save the time so I could erase out the keyframe. So be careful on that. I guess just for the speed, I will turn off the cloner, and now it's just going to generate from the initial one. But now they're going to generate at full scale high up in the air and get dropped down to the ground, which is a little strange. How are they getting over there? What? Oh, did I just have the wrong object selected? I guess I did. So yeah, it's going to generate. Well, here's what this is actually exactly what I meant. Oh, it's not so bad. But you see how we'll get this infinite line pushing off to the side? Just something we have to keep in mind. Now, these are sliding away from each other a bit. I'd like to prevent that. So I'll give it even more slowdown, even more damping. So 99.99 should be crazy slow. The refresh on that's a little bit strange. And then turning off the fracture for a moment, because that's what's going to be slowing us down. If I play now, that should be pretty dang quick. And you can see them slow down, not necessarily as quickly as I'd want them to. They do eventually, and as there's more, they will slow down. But you see that, do you see how there's kind of a gap in the initial ones that are getting shoved away? I'd really like them not to do that. So when, kind of two things we could do. When linear damping sort of fails you, where it doesn't have enough power, and that's not unusual for that to happen. The next thing I like to do is create a force friction, and this is going to be a very powerful overall tool in the scene to just drain energy out from what's happening. So in order to demonstrate, and we'll see if it works at all, I'll put the linear damping back down to default and use the friction at times 100, and let's see what that does. And they still seem to move out to the side a bit, and let's do 1,000. Okay, 1,000's bad. You now see this oscillation happening. It's gone beyond the point where it could calculate those. So we got to be careful. Rewind, doesn't like those. 500? 500 works. Let's see if it's doing any better job. Yeah, well, you see right now, I'm not seeing those gaps in between that had been emerging before. So I think already this is behaving better than it had been. A thing to keep in mind is these are spreading out, they're spreading out from a center point, but because they're not starting out really, really tiny, they're immediately shoving each other away kind of in all directions. And I'd prefer they didn't do that. I don't know if we have too much of a choice. What I did want to check is the end scale. So yeah, the end scale is 1. And we could add variation onto it so they could do, be different sizes in the end. But there's no like start scale. So I guess the only way to do that is to have them grow. I'm going to try putting a bunch of oh, no, you can't go above 100% variation. What does this look like? I just want to see what the cubes end up looking like. There's definitely some bigger ones and some smaller ones. It's interesting. I wouldn't mind some variation, but something to keep in mind. But I think that I do want to bring back the overall scale that they get. So just to stop it from doing that big old refresh, we'll give it a couple extra frames. So we'll say it takes 50 frames to get up to their final size, but I'm going to scale them up even larger. So in the end, they'll jump up to 20 by 20 by 20. Keyframe those. And at the beginning, we'll go back down to 0.01, super tiny. And the idea here is that they hopefully won't really be colliding with each other as they are initially created. Hitting play. Yeah, super tiny. Keep in mind that I should zero that out so it doesn't trick me anymore. So they start really tiny and they're getting larger, and there's a bunch of variation, and they end up larger than they were originally. Let's take a look at it from the beginning again. You can see that there's a whole pile of them, and they're not flying really far away because they're so small. And yeah, so these will continue to get shoved away while being really tiny. And are we still up in the air? Yeah, we are 20 in the air, but I'll move it up even more. So they're up even higher. Well, I mean, the blocks are getting pretty large, so I'll move it 50 into the air. So those will fall. And as they're all piled up on top of each other. Yeah, that's more of the motion I was looking for. Okay, that's the idea. That's a new one. Now, the scale, like I said, the scale will affect where the... Why did I name that color? I meant to name that cloner. Not that it's doing anything, but it should have been cloner. This emitter is not seeing their scale, but the scale, it's still looking at their center point, and based on their scale, push the other ones away, so it still translates through, like the concept continues to work. So if we were to take the fracture there, we can see how it's broken those apart. It won't render any of those. Let's see how our render did overall. I mean, yeah, it's the effect I want. Let's just see if the new one looks any better. Because they're larger, I just want to see it at a larger resolution. Jump the gap up, back up to the original 0.5 we could have just stuck with. And just want to see where they begin. Okay, cool. So save on that. This will essentially be the last test unless anybody has any specific things you'd like to see me modify this with. Let's see. If somebody is asking, is there a way without dynamics to do it? Not too much. Not that comes to mind, because they have to push each other out of the way. If they're not pushing each other out of the way, that's the primary. Let's look at the original reference. The primary thing that they're doing is each one is pushing the previous ones out of the way. And if they're not dynamic, then how would you push those away? And I honestly can't think of one. Trey is asking, does Maxon own Substance? They do not. I think Adobe bought Substance. Oh yeah, somebody already responded. Emit particles that are rocks flying off the fracture. I'm not sure what I would do with that. And our basic emitter system isn't going to be too dynamic for us there. Surface of sphere. Surface of sphere is wouldn't be terribly difficult. That's a fun modification on it. While this is rendering, we can take a look at the way that might be done. And that's actually a really cool idea. Good. Who said that? Yeah, Travis. I think you were joking, but that's a good idea. So, yeah, this is actually, it's pretty straightforward. So the emitter, let's see, what do we do? First, we need this to be subdivided. Let's do an icosahedron. 32. Yeah, that's an acceptable amount. The emitter, let's clean up things we don't need. We don't need that cloner. We don't need this. This emitter needs to be exactly, let's zero it out, PSR, reset PSR, which is actually now called reset transform. That needs to be 100 units in the air, but not just 100 units. It also needs to be, let's do 120. Hit apply. Then create a null and put the emitter into the null. And then that null will get the vibrate tag. The vibrate tag now will be controlling not position, but rotation. We'll spin this around 720, just so it can go past 360. And it's got to go slow, so I'm going to say 0.02. We'll see how that looks. This Voronoi Fracture isn't going to be doing anything for us there, but it will on the new sphere. Excellent. So those are going to be creating the emitter. Those are going to create cubes. Those are going to hopefully be spinning around randomly on the surface of the sphere. The sphere itself needs to be dynamic, so I think I will make a duplicate again, hide that one, and make it the collision. We don't need the floor anymore. So just to make sure this is a static mesh. Excellent. So once again, that is our collide. Next up, we need gravity to go in the orientation that we want. So Control D, dynamics, gravity 0. We don't have any gravity. And then dynamics, or I'm sorry, simulate forces, field force. And the field force, make sure I'm not in fall off. I want to be an object that's going to be attracted to a direction. We could use the sphere, but that takes longer to calculate. So mathematically perfect would be a spherical field. And as I increase that, we can make, essentially we want this to be like out huge to infinity. But as long as we're inside this one, then everything should be pulling either in or out. I never know if it's forward or backward. I'll set it to 100. Remember that 40 is the equivalent of gravity. So I do not need to see the display. We just need to see if the particles go in or out. So let's hit a frame forward. Let's go another frame forward. Yeah, okay. So I'd like to, let's turn off the fracture for a moment. And I guess we'll just let them scale in. So it should be relatively safe to hit play. They're going to be really small. Also, they're hidden. There we go. So now you can see these are getting created, and with any luck, they're getting pulled on the sphere. Keep in mind they're not rotating, but they're getting pulled constantly towards the center, and then they're colliding with this sphere. They do seem to be piling up more, but our gravity is not as strong here. So this field can be cranked up to, before we went to 1,000, so that would be the equivalent of 400. We'll see if those pull in any tighter. They seem to get a little jittery. This is a sphere now. Let's change that to that's a static mesh, but I'd like it to be ellipsoid to be a sphere. And we'll start that over. You do see them getting attracted straight to the surface there. But then they start doing this little oscillation that could be the field force just being too strong. Also, our friction, we already know that that was kind of on the edge of being too strong. So we'll pull back on both of those, try and make it reasonable. Actually, I'll turn that friction off entirely. And I just want to see what happens. Wait, they seem to, well, I'm not entirely sure what's going on. They did seem to get attracted, but then they go shooting away. This sphere collide, oh, it does have 100% bounce. I'm not sure where that came from, but let's get rid of that bounce. And I guess friction is good. Let's have friction. Well, with no friction on the cubes, I guess that's not specifically doing anything. Okay, now there's no bounce on it anymore, but they're still flying away. So that's either something's going weird with that, but I don't know why they seem to get attracted and then fly away. But I will try inverting. In our field, inside of the sphere, in direction, they're currently inverted. So I'm going to flip that around and let's see if what they seem to do. No, you see they blow away right away. So why are they going in and then shooting out? I mean, we can pretty distinctly see that effect happening. I mean, the radius is, like I said, for all purposes, infinite. We're inside of the full strength. We can even say full strength all the way. I'll do 99. I don't trust the 100 there. I've seen it have a bug in the past. But I don't think what I just changed is going to have any effect. With the friction turned off, nothing is slowing them down, but I don't think that that's a problem. But I will jump these back up to 99.9. Energy drain. Nope, they still fly away. Yeah, Zach, that's what I was kind of thinking, is I was really strong, but I kept on lowering it. We're only at 100, which is only a little more than gravity. I'll drop it to 20. Yeah, they're still drifting away. It's very strange. Well, oh, that's interesting. You see how they're kind of like pushing away and then seemingly going back again? Why would it do that? Could it just be the growth is like pushing out? But I don't understand. Like, are they kind of doing like a little hop that they're all colliding with each other and then pushing out? Are they too large? So let's get rid of this scale variation and the cube. When they get to their, oh, that's weird. Why is their size at 50 is set to, oh, there it is. That was weird. Do you see it said like 0.003 and now it suddenly says 20. So go figure on that. They definitely fall down the surface. But now, like, are they stacking on top of each other and the stacks are forcing them away? But like the gravity, I mean, that should mean higher gravity is good. But if it's anything like it looked in the last one, these are going to drift away and then slowly they're going to get attracted back to the surface again. So is it merely their scaling is forcing them away or the stack is pushing them away? Each of those should still be calculating as a sphere. Yeah, it's still an ellipsoid. So why are they getting flung up into the air? I'm really kind of at a loss for why it's doing that. There's ways we could compensate it, but I'd like to know why it's happening. The first thing that, I mean, I don't know why. The first thing I shall do is move this to 105 away from the surface. Just to, now it's so close to the surface that it's not flying above. So with any luck, those get generated. And let's see. Now see, yeah, those individual, no, then they do drift away. That is the weirdest thing. I honestly am stumped as to why it's doing that. Let's kill off our collision margin. I mean, those are relatively small. I'll try changing the overall world scale. I don't want to increase the steps per frame. We're already running relatively slow. And off they go. There's no friction on them either, so like they should just be sliding to like the place of least resistance. That's what I would think would be happening. Is there some force here that I didn't notice? Like a collider that they're bouncing into that I didn't realize? I'm not seeing everything. Everything looks correct. It's pretty weird though, isn't it? So like I said, there's ways that we can kind of force it. So if I create a second collider sphere here, so you see it's going larger than that one, this becomes a object that I can collide with, and I will have to set that, I think, to a static mesh because I want it to be on the inside. And this invisible one should stop them from flying too far away from the surface. But I don't know what kind of end result we're going to get there. And like I said, that's not a proper fix for what's going on, but now you can see that they can't escape because they'll hit that secondary wall. Well, okay, some of them can escape because of steps per frame. Yeah, they really want to escape. Okay, well, I'm continuing to be stumped there. I can't mechanically, I mean, everything we're doing seems to be right. It's possible I missed some detail, but we can't, I'm not going to spend any more time on this one for now, but I would like to know why that's happening. Just temporarily, I can turn that fracture on, and you can see that, you know, to the extent that they're staying near it, that the effect is working on the sphere and it will create the additional chunks, but it is not cooperating. So we'll give that a save. And cell growth effect, sphere underscore broken. Maybe somebody can help me figure out what's going on there. I don't think Tobias is asking about the attractor. I don't like. I'm assuming when you say attractor, you mean the attraction force. So we've got the attractor here, and I don't like using that because it has a fall off, like a mathematical fall off. Because you know how like light has a fall off. Well, gravity also has a fall off, and that the attractor has that built in. Where I really want an absolute gravity that's pulling everywhere all the time, full strength there. And this rig that we built with the field force should be doing that. One last thing I'm going to try. I'm going to say it. Well, no, absolute velocity would stop them from, or that would keep them accelerating. So yeah, I'm just kind of stumped. This render should have gotten quite a few frames done. So we'll tackle the next question, but let's see what this one ends up looking like. Hitting play. Yeah, once you get that base mesh down, then it's not too bad. It's popping a little bit. But yeah, but that's, you know, these are going to have moved, for these larger ones are going to have moved further away. So there's nothing to stop these early ones from pushing away. So as this gets thicker and there's more pushing against it, it starts becoming more coherent. And it starts popping around less. Yeah, you see that there it starts actually getting pretty stable, but everything keeps on moving. So that's also another little problem. But I'd like to tackle another question. Let's see. Trey, did you ask the first question? I feel like you might have asked the first one, but maybe not. Real world simulation. Let's see what we get. Oh dear. Let's see. Yeah, so I think this is real. I'm not sure why it seems so low resolution. Am I like zoomed in? No, I'm at 100%. Anyway, this is, you know how like you get like, this is a bunch of pollen that fell from the trees, I believe. So the entire thing is blanketed in a white fuzz. And in a lot of ways, just think of it like the dandelion seeds. Imagine you just got like, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of dandelion seeds all lined up. So they set fire to it and it's going to burn away all the pollen, all those seeds, and it doesn't burn long enough to affect the grass or the trees. It'll pass right by it. Like, you know, grass does not casually want to burn. But you'd have to monitor this very carefully because you never know if it does stick around in a spot and burn a little extra long. The question, of course, being, is there any way to tackle this in cinema? It goes to, well, like we don't have X particles, and we'll see if we can do it from a vertex map. You know, we have not done thinking particles in a really, really, really long time. And let's see if we can do a little bit of thinking particle stuff just for fun. So, new file. And if we're doing vertex map method, then we need a lot of polygons, which is, I can't think of any way around that. It just kind of becomes a resolution of the image that we're working from. Other than that, that's not necessarily true. How would I do that? I guess it would still require a vertex map if I did it that way. And I feel like with the way it's in real life working there is more like a vertex map would work for us here. 4,000 by 4,000. We could attempt to do it somewhat real world scale, which I typically just make a figure. And it's like, okay, the figure is just going to keep me constantly with a frame of reference of where everything should be. Now, okay, that seems like too much, but maybe 500 by 500. If the vertex map can handle that, this seems like a good resolution for us. I might want to come back to this plane, so I will add a recall tag from Rocket Lasso. That just means if I make this editable and do a bunch of stuff to it, I can always double click that tag and then bring the object back to this state. So making this editable, I would like to add a point and say set vertex weight and set that to 0. As always, we're going to use fields. We will use a freeze, but I like to make it from scratch. We need a starting point, so a sphere, a tiny sphere in the center will do that for us. There we go. That essentially is illuminating one point all the way. Now that that is there, I'd like a fresh freeze. The freeze goes to set add and clear, then set it to grow, and currently there is 28 points in between each one. So what I usually like to do is at least double that. So we'll say 29 times 2. So it's just a little bit more than that. But I'll have a growth strength down to something pretty low. 10 might not be low enough, but let's see what kind of refresh we get here. So hitting play. with any luck. Yeah, we see it's growing. I mean, our frame rate is not amazing. We did go a little overboard on the growth, but you can now see that we do get a nice smooth transition there. But after 30 seconds, it's growing really fast. So I'm going to drop this growth down to 2. So we're 1/5 of that initial speed. And we can see essentially the first few frames are going to look a little bit clunky as the initial part is getting initiated. But then as it goes, we should start seeing a smoother transition move out to the edge. Then that gets a lot more, you know what, this is just for our purposes on the live stream, that's too much. So I'm going to shrink a few times. Those outer layers are going to go a long way for slowing us down. So I just select it all, and I'm hitting U, K, U, K, U, K, U, K, U, K. And I'm just shrinking the selection. And those outer ones, like I said, are, you know, a lot of the overall selection. So now hitting UI and delete those outer ones, you know, that's probably taking out a significant chunk. So, you know, not too much faster, but a bit. And then right now it's going to be perfectly round, but some variation in there goes a long way. So there is a freeze radius, and that's that radius right there. So creating a lovely field noise, and actually putting it up on top for a second there is good. Set that to normal. Here's our overall noise. I'd like it to have some sort of visual. I want to see the pattern a bit, and depending on how messy you want it to be, you could change this to different types. Something more random, like Luca is a super like noisy random one that could be made even larger. So now you can see these very imperfect motions. You get two options here. One, you could leave it just like this and then let the growth happen. But what I typically do is I give it some animation speed, nothing too fast, but that way if something's kind of getting left behind, eventually a lighter area will tap into it and allow it to grow. So dropping that random into the radius, it's now constantly changing the search radius of each point, which ultimately means, and you know what, I need this to go quicker for our test. So chop, 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 and chop. Delete. That should get rid of about half. So yeah, that doubled our frame rate. So allowing that to go, it is growing. No, it's growing, but we just need a lot more frames. And it's one of those things where the circle will get big quickly, and then we'll start seeing a lot more effect on the edges. So you can already see that this is not a perfect circle. It's moving out in a little bit more of a pattern. And that will, you know, the noise we put over it is just going to have an effect of the way it moves. Now, maybe I made that animate a little fast. I'll drop it down to 5 and just see if we see a more consistency in the pattern. Yeah, now you can see, already I can see a little bit more detail here. So it's still moving. I just made it animate too quick for what was going on. So you can see it, some different leading edges change a little bit. Now, like I said, I want to, this is still, I more than I usually do, I went way overboard on what we were feeding this thing, and for our testing purposes, we just did not need it to have anywhere near that number of polygons. It was huge. So that should be about double again. So now we're getting this type of growth, which is excellent. What I would like to do is name this map. So we'll just call this one the growth. And then we need a second map. And this second map we'll call, I'll just call it the wave. And in the field, it doesn't have any of this fancy stuff, but what it does have is our other vertex map. And with this vertex map brought in, currently it's set to nearest, which is fine. We'd also just say index, which will reference the direct index of the previous one, so there'll be a 1-to-1 translation. We can also say average, and I do like average because it will blur a couple of the surrounding ones, and it just makes everything a little bit smoother, and that can be a good thing depending on what you're going for. Adding a modifier layer curve, though, we can actually get the effect that I want, and that is pulling up a midpoint and then pulling this edge down. And as I do that, we now get a ring around the outside. We can now perfectly map this however we want to being a ring that is always traveling around. Essentially, we're saying, hey, if it's all the way turned on, well, if it's all the way turned off, you're off. If you're all the way on, you're off. But everything in between, you have now been mapped. So now we get this lovely ring that's going to be randomly growing around the edge. We could pinch that as tight as we want via this. We could also change the transition radius, but having control over it this way, I think, is more than enough for what we need. Now, giving this file a save to a fire growth. Let's see. I haven't done a vertex map. Well, I haven't done thinking particles in forever. Let's see what we can get here. Right click, programming tags, Espresso. Then, we got a lot to do. I'm gonna make a null act. Well, we'll see how this goes. Okay, like seriously, I haven't done thinking particles in a long time. Searching, we need a storm. This is a P storm. So that's going to be what's generating our particles. Now, that is asking for a position right out of the gate. And I don't know that we can feed that maybe we don't want a P storm. Let's go new node, thinking particles, no, not dynamic. Is it initiator? No. Which one is the emitter? Yeah, the generator. So it's P born, P blurp, P draw, P fragment, P matter waves. Like some of these I've never even played with, like blurp and born. Honestly, I've 99% of the time I always use P storm. How do we make it generate from a vertex map? I just was assuming we'd be able to. Fragment breaks things apart, I remember. P blurp, I don't remember what that does. An object, an animation phase. Yeah, I think that's some sort of like transition between objects. Draw, that's if we pre-drew them. Matter waves is the only other open one. UV lights, object, a selection, a UVW. Constant. This one, I think this is how we could feed it a texture. Maybe we can feed it a texture, but there's a bunch of extra settings here that I'm not sure what to make of. But you can also generate from a surface. Let's see. Let's say we have a plane. I'm gonna get rid of that for now. Let's get rid of all the ones. Just make sure that we're not introducing things we don't want. Currently it's set to count. Let's say it's a rate, and I'll set to 1001. And right now it's just a circle. If I hit play, no, see, it is generating for the entire surface, so that's a fine start. Now it's asking for a selection. Let's see if it will accept a vertex map. You can drag it in, but it's just the name because it's really old, so it's not a link field, it's a name field. And now you can see it's definitely still generating from everywhere. So let's not do a selection, although we could convert that to a selection. So let's keep that in mind. Now it's birth type, rate, birth type, constant, texture, effect, vertex map. The vertex map is the wave. Let's see. It's possible it's backwards, but I'm thinking that's probably not working. No, that doesn't seem to be having an effect. Life, speed, size, distance. Yeah, none of those are specifically that. It didn't like the vertex map. So I don't think that this one is going to do it. Now the P storm type is count, and then, yeah, it's just a shape. Does anybody have any vague idea of which one it would be? Because I feel like I should be able to limit it to geometry in a more specific way. Rolling data, shape, alignment. I remember those. Deflect, force, freeze. But yeah, none of these are growth. These are just affecting things. Only these generators are where they generate. Particle age. The if we set that to rate on a P storm, then I think it's just going to be them shooting out from that one box, because it doesn't care about the object. There's no object here. So it just wants a particle position. If I drag this object in, it's just going to take that object's properties. A vertex map, this vertex map doesn't output anything specific. Like, so that's not a thing. Like I said, we could convert it to a selection tag. It's a little clunky, and I don't even know if it would work. I suppose it's easy to do the test. So back to this matter waves, and it's currently looking at the texture. Let's set that to constant, and let's try doing the selection just for fun. So mesh. No, it's under select. Store selection. They changed the name of it. This is going to be fields. Delete the current field. It will view that one. So it's this wave. And you have to double click to show. Oh, what's going on here? Show me the polygons. Oh, let's let it grow for a second. It's snowing upward. All right, that's enough to at least see it. Vertex map, selection tag rather, double click, and yeah, you see it has now selected those, which is just fine. So now that there's a selection tag, let's call it wave. Yeah, wave is fine. The same name is dangerous, so wave selection. Selection-y. Can that get limited to a selection? That's interesting. I just dragged the name over and it applied the name to both. Old school tools. So how does that do? Oh, look at that. It's over there. That's not where the wave selection is. Oh, suddenly jumped here, but I don't know that it's everywhere. Let's see what it's doing. I mean, okay, it does. I don't know for sure, but it does seem to be working as far as generating there. But I mean, I don't like, it's not going to be constantly updating. The selection tag doesn't constantly give us a visual update the way the vertex map does. Although I can select the vertex map, and now you can see that they should be generating not from where the vertex map is, but where the vertex map is going over 50% is creating that selection. So then it becomes a, those can now generate from those spots. It's a little clunky. It's a little A or B. And especially, like, given the overall effect, like, there's not a lot of direction to pursue this in a very detailed way, because this effect is so, like, we're going to need so many particles there. I was kind of hoping just to talk about the principle of the growth here, but it was a little more limited than that. I'm trying to think of how it would be mapped, because they are traveling up. I would kind of like to do, I'll save this one. That's as far as I will go on that part of it. But let's open up a new file and try a completely different methodology. Like, couldn't be more different. So here's my thought. Another plane, another huge plane. Once again, stay on human scale. What's the best way to do this? We could just scale, but I would like it to be kind of like dynamic in a way. So instead of keyframing something up, we could totally keyframe something, by the way. It's possibly even a smart thing to do. However, when do we do it the smart way? We do it the fun way. Creating a cloner, setting the cloner to radial, increasing it, doing, actually we can do quite a few of these, quite a few spheres. Increase the radius and then pull them up in the air just a little bit. Okay, the plane becomes a collider. The sphere becomes a rigid body. So those should just fall to the ground and sit there. So nothing special there. Now let's, we were having a lot of trouble with these in the previous one, but let's see if we can do a force. Oh, that would be, can I do that? Well, that was running too slow anyway. I would like to do another field force, and the field force will be a Another spherical field. Really, 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 really big. I mean, it's almost an identical setup. But now it's a field force pushing outward, and those are just spheres. So if we hit play, let's see what happens. It's very weak right now, 25. Did I put in the... Yep, I put in the wrong one. Bloop. That's not doing much. Add to velocity. Those are dynamic, right? What is up with our field force? What am I doing wrong? Field force. A field force with lost strength and a spherical field fed in. This should be doing something, right? Solid. Yeah, look, I make a solid and it shoots straight up. So why is a spherical field, which has a direction, it has a scale, has a radius, why isn't it having an effect? Is there a bug in the spherical field right now? Or am I just utterly doing something wrong? Feel like I'm doing it right. I turned off the clamps. That's clamped as well, but I don't think clamping, that's a multiplier. That's just like, is it 0 to 100%, and that gets multiplied by this value. I'm gonna try setting absolute velocity. Yeah, even absolute velocity is not anything. And as you saw in the field, if I create a solid, they just instantly take off. So the solid is working. It's just the spherical field seemingly isn't working. Let's try a box field. I mean, it shows a visual direction. Yeah, look, those work. I think our spherical field is broken. And you can see it's cartoonishly over strong right now. But yeah, this is what it should have been doing right away, where it's like slowly moving, and the spherical field just wasn't working. Go figure. I mean, a little frustrating, but let's invert that direction. And I'm using a rectangle, which is not what I want to use, but we'll use what we got. So that's going to be pushing them out in a square way. And it's nice and weak right now, but I could increase this, and you see how they're going to be moving away. And what's funny is, like, it's not working because, I mean, it's a box, so it's not working, but we can kind of fake it if we put a vibrate tag on there. I mean, it doesn't have to be vibrate, but I can do this, and now it's going to start spinning, and I can put like a 90-degree spin on there and put, you know, any speed we want in here. So, like, it's totally random. And so as those spin and choose different directions, it should effectively be doing a pretty much perfectly spherical one. So that's our very ridiculous workaround to get the equivalent of a spherical field pushing away. Okay, so those are randomly pushing out in all directions. That's fine. Then a random field is multiplied on top of it, and that random field should probably be pretty huge. It can be simple, but this is just to add a little variation onto it. I'm going to increase the power just so we can start seeing the variation. So you can see that's multiplying. I guess the random field might be positive and negative, because you see some of them look like they're pulling inward. So if I drop it to 50%, then now in general they're going to be pushing outward, and you can just get that variation of the way they're pushing out. So you kind of get that frazzled edge a little bit, which is kind of what I was going for. Good enough. So selecting the cloner, I would like a tracer, and the tracer is going to connect elements, connect all objects. So it's connecting all objects, and then there's a gap right there. But if we say close spline, then it does close the spline. And also don't trace the vertices. So now we have a single spline interconnecting all of these, and this is technically fully dynamic, and it's going to spread out, and we have this line that's traveling around. So what's pretty neat is I can change this spline type to something like a B-spline with a uniform subdivision, and you see it gets nice and smooth as a line and travels along. Anyway, you see how simple that was supposed to be, and the spherical field was tripping us up. So we can increase the resolution of this by increasing our count and have that be a larger or smaller number. And depending on the scale of the noise and the variation, it's all going to be pushing out. There's a long way to get a random line that's going to be just randomly traveling outward. So now that that's happening, I had been thinking that we could just do how would we get the direction to lag? There might be a way, but a simple thing would be just throwing that into an extrude. And I want it to go up on Y by 20. So now we have this constant line that's traveling inward. Oh, and there's caps. I don't want caps. Off, off. SSAO. So you can see kind of where it's in contact. So now you get this constant line traveling. Now, like I said, what I would love is if we could get those kind of lagging behind. The processes I'm thinking of to get a lagging line behind are doable, but they're kind of ridiculous. We're making a overly convoluted rig, I will fully admit. If I trace these cloners, tracer, trace those. I do want to trace the paths. So now there should hopefully be a line left behind each one. Limit from end 10 frames. Yeah, let's say 22 frames. And I see there's a little trail behind each one of them. And then I say, okay, cool, there's a trail behind each one. How about making a matrix? And the matrix will clone onto an object. The object will be that tracer. I want it one per segment. I don't want to loop the segments. I want there to be exactly one per segment. And now you can see there's now a matrix on the tip of each of the backs of each one of those. So then I can transform those to push upward, although some of them are going down. We can get around that. Just the way splines work, that is not surprising. However, we can easily get around that by adding a plane effector and saying, yes, I want to push upward. And some are still going down, but if we change this from a transform space of the node to the effector, they will all push upward. So now all of them are pushing upward. So now you can see that I've got those back a little bit, kind of lagging behind, and up. So if I make another tracer, so I'm going to duplicate this tracer and say that this tracer doesn't trace that cloner, but instead traces that matrix, then I should get another line that's interconnecting all of those. And because each of those, hopefully, each index of this tracer is based on the index of the clone, and then the index of that matrix is based on the index of the spline that got made, then hopefully these have the same point counts and the same indexes. So now we've got two different tracers. Let's just call this one tracer dot tail. Let's call this one dot leading. This one is dot lagging. All right, now we create a loft and we put in the leading and the lagging, and it should hopefully loft between them. And however many clones that we have, which is, let's put these all kind of in the calculation order as well. The tracer definitely needs some calculation. Certain spline things need to be in a particular order to work. So there's a count of 47. So loft will be set to 47 segments. Mesh subdivision, none. Per segment, none. Caps, none, none. All right. All of that work to get a dynamic line that's going to be expanding, sweeping up to another one that's lagging behind, because you'll see in a reference that it's definitely kind of got this tilt back where it's coming from. Yeah, that makes sense. So, but I mean, what's cool is that we've kind of built a dynamic rig here to do it. So we can change properties to make that lag further behind or not be as tall, like this plane effector. I could say, hey, don't push up as far, so it can now be lower, and then we could have it lag further behind by making this tail lag 55 frames behind. You know, see that we are pushing those further back, traveling the same path, just a little bit further behind. So, like I said, is it a convoluted rig? Yes, but is it kind of fun to put together? Also yes. So, having done all of that nonsense, can we just do a simple material on here? Maybe. So that becomes fire. And I'm trying to think. I mean, if we just pass through it, it's going to get really twitchy. Also, this would look better in Redshift. Should we do it in Redshift? Because we get a nice glow. Whoever responds first, either say standard or Redshift. And whichever one I see first is what I'm going to do. Because I don't have a preference. It's just going to look better in Redshift, but we'll be using all the same noises. Double Redshifts popped in, so that's what we're doing. All right. Let's save this file because we're getting weird with it. This will be fire ring growth underscore Redshift. Okay. So, get rid of that. I'm going to go into our cell one and just steal our Redshift render settings from here. Copy, just so I don't have to set some of those super basic settings again. And paste the new one, delete the old. Okay, just got some of the basic settings in. Cool. Now we need to make a Redshift material. Redshift material. That replaces that one. Okay, so it should be mapped just fine. Ooh, can we get a 2D material? Let's find out. If I say I want a Maxon noise, searching in Redshift, can we make this a 2D noise? And actually, maybe somebody can shout out, because I was trying to do this the other day with something, and it wasn't quite working for me. If I just put this in the output for now, and in Redshift say, go. Okay, so what I want to do is make it a two-dimensional material. How do I make it 2D? Because right now it's set to object, but if I set it to UV vertex, that seems weird. How do I show this? What I want to do is inside of a cinema noise, inside of regular cinema, I can say space texture, and I can say 2D. Is there a way of doing that in the Redshift material? And I have a feeling that would be something to do with like a UV space or something. But I just don't know how the UV space stuff works. Right now there's object and there's world. It should not. Okay, we'll try it. Scott, are you guys, when you say are you guys mostly in Twitch now? I mean, I think almost everybody's in Twitch right now. The if I set to UV, I don't, but then you get the vertex attribute name, and then I don't feel like here visually, shouldn't that change? But it doesn't. Like that should update. Sorry, it's really hard to get everything on the screen here. If I change that to like world, it doesn't look any different than it did if it was set to object, which doesn't look any different if I set it to UV vertex. They're all identical, so they can't all be. I mean, one's not working because I should have seen a difference between them, right? But I don't like this vertex attribute name and stuff like that. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know about the forcing a refresh, but I'll give it a try. Let's go to world and force a refresh. So we kind of get this white, black spot. And then I go to object, force refresh. White, black spot. Refresh. Oh, okay. You were right. The refresh did required, and it did work. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Zach. Okay, so now we have a 2D noise, so that means it shouldn't be shifting around all over the place. I also subdivided that a bunch with our different smoothing, so this could probably go up like at least 3 times. Yeah, so that's now smoother. We could go even smoother still, but let's just do that for now. Okay, let's see if we can scale this noise to be something useful. So we got scale right here. So the overall scale seems fine. I just need to be, this is X, Y, Z, probably X. So let's say X100. Maybe that's not X. Maybe, I don't know. Let's just see what happens. Not that one. That makes it more vertical. So this one needs to be smaller, 0.1. There we go. Okay, so 0.1, And then we can stretch this one way up. So I don't think it actually needs to be stretched too much. We just need that to tile the correct number of times around. And we would need this to probably keyframe up larger as we go. But we'll keep that in mind. Okay, so then let's make a ramp. And this ramp, I didn't set the shortcut up for outputting it, so I have to manually plug them in. So now you can see we got black up to white, which is just fine. Let me see which one is transparency. So I need to feed, let's feed that in. And here is opacity. So I just want to see if black or white is transparent. Okay, so black is transparent. Okay, so that means this should get inverted, and that will multiply. So then we can pull up some way of combining this. I like reaching for the color layer, meaning I can take this base ramp color and then feed in this noise, and we can combine these in different ways. For now, let's just do a simple multiply. Yeah, simple multiply and feed this into there, and now we should see it goes from white up to black. Now that I've done that, I might even feed the ramp in a second time. Turn on the second layer and set that one to overlay. So now the bottom gets even whiter, and then it can fade out quicker up top. Now this noise is a really simple noise, so something like a Naki. Yeah, Naki's pretty good for a fire. Now we also have this offset that will have to be keyframed. Let's see, not that one. Oh, maybe not that. Maybe it is this one that just has to go really slowly. Hard to tell. 0.1. Yeah, is there anything like a, I think we just put espresso notes in here, right? Yeah, so we can, yeah, let's try that. I'm going to make a time node. I've never done this before in Redshift, so this is going to be something new. Making a time node. We probably have to convert this to a vector, because we've got a max on noise and it has an offset of all of these different directions. And if I output that, yeah, you see it's just a single number, so we need to feed it a vector. So that's simple enough. We can search for vector. Actually, that's searching for all these Redshift nodes, so we need another cinema, and hopefully this does work. Usually I'd be searching for these, but now I'm going to say reals to vector. I really hope this works. So we already were saying that it's x, y, so time will be fed into y, but I'm probably going to need to remap that. Oh yeah, I can't search for, I can search for the Redshift equivalents, but we need to do a little bit of straight espresso here. Calculate, range mapper. We could probably do a multiplier as well, but let's do a range mapper. Output that to y, and we need really small numbers. So if it goes from 0 to 1, I'm going to say it's going to go out to 0 to 0.1, but that is not clamped, so it'll keep on going up and up and up and up. Let's try feeding that into this value, and I don't know for sure, but let's try doing a frame forward and see if anything looks like anything. Hard to tell. We can just send it out to the renderer. Yeah, let's just send it out to the proper render. It's already set up for it. It's going to look really weird for your first few frames until it's got enough of a tail. And I just want to see if there's some movement upward. And I didn't think about it as going to be shrinking, but let's see if we can. Doesn't look like it, but I'm not even sure I'm on the correct number. But I also don't know if Redshift accepts espresso nodes the way that I'm doing it. Well, let's just find out. There's definitely a couple frames of lag on this rig. Keep that in mind. Alrighty. Let's go back to 1. So this should be outputting 0, 1, 0 as it goes. And this, oh, this is the time. I was thinking it was going to be the frame. So let's do the frame. I just want to see if it visually changes. Save, render. Blink, blink, blink. Shouldn't take too many frames. Okay, well, definitely something is happening, okay? But the time is way slower than the frame, so I was already doing math to compensate for it. So when I did the 0.1, I thought we were on frame, so it's still probably going to be way too quick. But if this works, then I'm going to be quite pleased. And the fact that's changing does imply that this is viable. Oh yeah, look, it is. It's going downward, so we have it backwards, but look at it traveling down. That's really good, though. Yeah, look at that. Look at that movement down. Oh, this is going to be good. Okay, so get rid of that. And this is really simple. We can leave time going forward. We just say -1, and now that's automatically translating that upward. Now, this is going to stretch as it gets longer. We could plug this in and make it stretch longer on one side if we wanted to. We can get there if we needed to, but in the same way we just used time to drive this offset, we could also be using time to drive this 0.1 stretch. Just keep that in mind. Now, I think, I don't know, it depends on how quick it goes, but I'm going to double the speed of that. And now let's start feeding this into our material. See if we can get a little bit of a red glow going. So this is the final opacity. So overall opacity color. And this should be no color, no reflection, overall emission. And let's just get a kind of a, we'll just start out with a nice orangey luminance that'll set up to 2. Maybe a little redder, and we can pull it off the edge. We can, we'll be able to set this up with a gradient eventually if we want to. So, Redshift render view, give me something. Okay, not terrible. We mostly need to play more with this fall off. And first of all, you get this overall ramp. If I pull this down more, you see we'll have control over how that ramp goes. But mostly something I like doing is overlaying multiple times. Oops. Let's add in another input. So we'll do number 3. And on number 3, I'll just say, hey, let's take in, actually I want to take in the noise again. So let's take in that noise again and overlay that another time. Let's turn on 3 and set that to overlay. Yeah, you see we start getting a higher contrast as that overlays. And there might be a better way of doing that, but like cranking up, you get a different effect by piping it in multiple times than you do by increasing the contrast of it. So just for fun, and you know, if somebody has a suggestion of a better way of doing that, I'm totally open to it, but it's kind of a technique I've used in various things for a while. Let's feed it in one more time just to overlay it again. And yeah, number 4 is now overlaying. You see we start getting a lot of fall off there. Now, we could also modify the ramp with a larger noise, because right now everything's kind of ending at the same point. It would be kind of neat if it didn't all end at the exact same point, but we'd have to duplicate this noise and set that up again, just layering up a lot more. Let's see, we can control the color. We could colorize this as a layer, so that could be kind of neat. Right now, let's see, let's make another ramp, and this ramp will be our fire color. Do we have in the presets? Ooh, we do have some fiery type things. There we go. We got a flame. That's exactly what I wanted. Like maybe we don't want the blue, but we'll start out with that. And now we've got this color. Let's copy this all over and say, hey, that's the base color. Then we're going to take that new ramp color that I made and get rid of 3 and 4. So, and even 2, because we're just plugging the 1. So this is going to multiply on top of the existing one that we had with this ramp, and that ramp is just ramping presumably from bottom up to top. So that becomes a new color. So in the Redshift material, we have this emission color. Drop that in and drag that on. And now we get this color going up. Like I said, this blue is probably going to be overpowering it. So we'll yank, yank, yank. In fact, we'll even just do it like this. Come on. So yeah, that is now going to colorize the way that that applies from top to bottom. Now that's applying. Yeah, things get interesting the way we can layer these up, because I could also make a duplicate of this ramp. Let's take the output of the previous one, feed that into the ramp as sort of the input, And with that as the input, let's just override that entirely for a second. And you see it's colorizing what we had done before. So this becomes a completely different gradient. And let's just kind of make it ourselves. I'd like a little more red in there. And there's a lot of brown, which probably means this whole thing needs to be inverted. Yeah, there we go. That's better. So we can pull that over. And that could be even more red. And just do a full distribution of knots. And it's just the way the layer underneath is colorized. So the point being is you have a lot of control over the way that those are going to lay out. But now I've got an additional color layer, so that could be turned on, and this could overlay, which is what it's currently doing. Let's output that into the emission. So yeah, now it's overlaying, but I could say, okay, only a little bit of overlay. But now it gives some dimension to the edges is all I was going for there. But that could be averaging, coloring, multiplying. Like there's a lot of different combinations. But what we got right there, that seems fine. All right, so let's just say, I don't know, a bunch of things on that might be terrible, but that's a beginning of the flame. Temporarily, let's close that because I would like, these are going to be rolling on the ground, but let's just get a ground that's a slightly higher up. It'd be kind of neat to do like the grass underneath, but I don't think, it would be nice to tackle one more question. So we'll keep this pretty basic right now. I'm not going to worry too much about this ground material. So I'm going to move this ground up until we're essentially meeting the flames, and that becomes the actual visual one. Also, the spheres are working great, but I don't want to visually, I don't want them to render out. And we could, just for fun, I've been using, like I said, I've been working on some renders for the upcoming plugin. I was using Quixel a bunch, so let me open up Bridge, and let's just yank over something, some ground material to apply. So, opening up Quixel. I got the monthly subscription to it, so we could even download something if need be. Oh, I gotta sign in. Give me a second. Sign in with Epic Games. Come on, autofill. Yes. Let's go to my purchased ones already. Is there anything that looks kind of grassy? I didn't grab too many. Here's just a couple assets I've been playing with. But we can't use anything with like any dimension. So here's a Nordic moss. We'll be growing on some Nordic moss. Now here's what's great is if you haven't played with Quixel Bridge, I am currently in Cinema and I'm currently in Redshift, and this should detect that I'm in Redshift. I'll save it just in case. So selecting this material that I purchased for, I think, 2 points, I can say export, and now it says exporting to Cinema, successfully exported. It goes into your current scene file, and it detected that Redshift was there, so it automatically made a Redshift material for me. It usually does this weird layout thing, which is fine. But yeah, now it's imported that material, so now that can be dragged onto that plane, and we could tile it a few times if we want to, and now we have a material on the ground. Cool. So let's let that run a few frames. I want to see it tilting off to the side. So yeah, that's kind of like the tilt that we've been building towards. Scale that up a bit. I wasn't thinking about it, but we could also get some height variation here. This I just pushed up on this plane on Y, but we could go into this fall off and feed in a random field. And this random field is based on a noise. So everything's pretty big. Let's say 500. And then if I got to refresh a little, that's fine. Doesn't refresh right away. Yeah, so yeah, there's some height variation on that now. I'd like it to be more. So let's push that up to, I don't know, 22. That might be overdoing it, but let's see. Yeah, so you can see we get some height variation on it, and that's going to be based on the individual trails and depending on the size of this noise. And I'm leaving the noise static, so as it moves, it's passing through that cloud of noise and goes up and down. So we have options. Everything's running pretty smoothly, so I'm going to increase this up to 100. So we get a lot more spheres, but all the rest of the rig should automatically adapt to it. And now we get that outline, and with that being larger, I can grab this plane, fall off the random field. It can be smaller. Let that run a little bit, and now we should see a little bit more height variation. It transitions a little quickly. There's a couple pops that I don't really want. So I guess I'll increase those a little bit. I guess they still pop. It's the way the loft is doing it. So maybe I have to deform that differently. But I do like that variation. Even if there's a few pops, I'll just deal with that as we go. Okay, so now Let's see how that looks kind of in its stretched out form. Like so. Save it. Redshift, render view, hit go. So now we should have that turned off. We get the, well, it's a very streaky fire right now. Is it passing through the ground a bunch? The way I overlaid them, it seems to, let's see. Yeah, I was eating off a little bit extra of the bottom than I wanted to. So let's make sure I've got it right there on the edge. Refresh. Okay, we see a little bit more of the bottom. I could overlay that more, for sure. We could also probably have multiple layers and have this be a little more curvy. But now, let's see. I want those to trail slightly less further behind. I don't want it tilting quite so much. But, I mean, we're getting that angle, which is neat. Then, so we got our trail. That can be lessened to 33. And now, I would like, well, a couple things we could do. It would be kind of neat to illuminate this just with that. Now, naturally, in Redshift settings, I think the GI is turned on, like right out of the box. Yeah, the GI should be turned on. And it's got 4 bounces. But, and somebody in the chat, let me know, is there a way of turning off the automatic light inside of Redshift? Because you see there's kind of like this ambient light. The only way I know of, and I'm sure there's a simple way of doing it, but the only way I've been doing it is I do something like create a spotlight, and I put the light like all the way down to 0. And now there's no light, and now you see only the illumination of this is doing anything. So that is now there, but the emission isn't super strong, so we're not really seeing much on the ground. So let's try grabbing our fire material and say emission strength 5. Well, I'm gonna go way too far and see if we can see the illumination up here. Yeah, you see as I crank it up now, there's starting to get to be some illumination on the edge. So that's kind of what I'm going for. You can also, these are not things I'm experts in. I do want to kind of over crank that a bit. I think we could make an area light going along there. So here's my thought. I don't know for sure if this will work, but we do have our, I guess I'll do it on our leading edge or our lagging edge. I'll try, I'm not sure which one. I'm gonna make a duplicate of the lagging edge and sweep that. So, and make a piece of geometry. So that goes into a sweep, and that gets fed a, keep it simple, add a rectangle. It's really large, so drop it to 3 by 3. Let's also turn off the materials. MQ is turn off material shortcut. I've been doing that a lot lately, so I learned the material, or the shortcut, and also I'd like constant shading, which is NE. So now we can at least see it. So now you see I've got this piece of geometry that's sweeping along the top. I don't want to render that, but I do want to create a Redshift area light. And if I take that area light, and we can turn this one off, area light, and say, hey, what's your shape? And I'm going to say your shape is actually a mesh, and your mesh is that sweep. Then hopefully that's going to now create a bunch of light for us. So I can say, hey, the color is a nice orange. So that should be creating a bright orange light. And then on the actual sweep, we just call this sweep fire. Right click on that, add a Redshift object tag under visibility, override, and say I don't want you seen by the primary visibility, and maybe not the secondary visibility. What are we seeing there? That's weird. Why is it still there? Let's try refreshing. Is it because, am I seeing it through the transparency? I thought that would turn that off. Maybe we can do it in the, maybe the area light is generating the physical one? Visible, well, that's, oh, that's visible there. Oh yeah, we're definitely going to be putting some bloom in here. Yeah, Zach thinks it might be intersecting. But wouldn't that be the secondary rays? Like, don't cast a shadow, don't do any of these things. Like, why is it still being seen? I don't know. Now you're saying I could move it up in the air. I'm going to temporarily make that editable because right now I can't move it up because it's a tracer. Moving that, hitting E. If I move that up, yeah, it suddenly disappears when I move it up. When I move it down, it's still there. If I move it up a little bit, yeah, you see it seems to, yeah, it's seeing it through the transparency. Very strange. I can't leave it editable, and I can't. I can't physically move that up because it's actively tracing those matrices. So my only choice, if we just have to physically move it, which is, there's probably some better way of doing that, but as my temporary quick solution, we need to deform the points away. So plane, deform, and actually I can deform the spline itself. So deform from the effector up on Y. I would like to deform the point. So that should push everything up into the air. And now I can deform it just by a few. Deform it by like 5. So there, that's moved up out of the way. That is generating light. So now we're not dependent on the GI from the actual fire. And yeah, that's sort of a thing. So yeah, let's get a short render going. Oh yeah, I want to get a little bit of bloom going on this thing. So create a camera. As long as you kind of got a little bit of scene going, let's change this to a 50 millimeter lens and get ourselves a nice angle, something where we can see that leading edge and then this general fire. And then right click camera, Redshift camera tag. And if you haven't played with these, they are really fun. With the camera tag turned on, we got lots of different effects we can do, including we can add some bloom in here. So we'll override that and start and enable, and we can start lowering this down. You can see we start getting this glow on top of it, changing the softness and or the intensity. We'll turn that off temporarily, and I also like playing with the streak, which gives a little bit more of a line effect, but it's very similar in a lot of ways. So as I pull this down, you can start seeing a different type of glow. I actually do like that. It's catching the ground a little bit more. It sparkles a little bit more, but I do like it. We'll keep the bloom. And then, very importantly, is our exposure. Turning on exposure and enabling that. We can change a ton of the properties here as far as the overall exposure and the f-stops and the vignetting. And then crushing the black. So we could brighten this up a bunch and be like, okay, we got a lot of light, but now let's start crushing the blacks away so we can maintain that and just get heavier contrast. In this scene, I don't think it's going too far, and what we've been making had been pretty good. So I don't think we need to change that. We'll just do that little bit of glow for now. There's not that much dimension, but the idea is that this should be kind of dynamically and randomly moving along the outside, and we got a bit of a tilt. Like I said, we could make more of an arc to that, like it could go up and then over. We could definitely add more layers of that, but let's just see what we end up with here. We already know that the first few frames are going to be pretty junky, so let's see how many frames it is junky. So rewinding all the way, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, we have to go about 10 frames before it's kind of settled in. But it depends on the size of the spheres. We'll just start it here. We could obviously shrink it smaller, but this is the way we built it, and it shouldn't break too much to render from there. So output starting on frame 10. Hopefully it does still calculate every one of those frames. And I don't think we're going to render too many frames of this, so I will go back to a full Instagram size here. And we've got our leading edge, like so. All right, save render to picture viewer. And give it a few frames. I don't think any given frame is going to take too long to calculate. I like to catch up, so yeah, and I've got relatively low render settings going here, so we'll just see how this ends up looking. Let's see. Oh yeah, environment. Would the environment? Well, yeah, an environment and a volume could go a really long way. And we do have the similar setup could go here. I was just trying to do it with a material, but we could probably do some sort of volume setup. I'm still exploring that. I only just barely started tinkering with the volume stuff, so I wouldn't be confident in doing that in a stream. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Pierre's mentioning how you could click the cogwheel and stop it from rendering constantly, but I wanted to see the effects as I clicked around. But I could set several, but I'm at the point where I don't know the settings intuitively enough to be like, oh, let's change this, and this, and see how it looks. I like what's kind of great about third-party renderers, not just Redshift, but any of third-party renderers, is how quickly you can get some feedback. It's like, ooh, like that looks good, that looks worse, this looks good. So. Oh yeah, Zach's saying that that mesh light that I did might have been intersecting, or that's might currently be a bug. No, the effect will update, but the render. Oh, I'm not sure what you mean. If you can, then I'll have to look into it. Or you can message me on Slack for elaborating. But the click the cogwheel will stop having the viewport rendering all the time. The effect will update, but the I see. So it's I got you. That it would be. I wasn't even thinking of it the way you're describing it, but you're saying that if I have the render view up, and then if I click the gear. Oh, then these effects come up, and it's just going to be working from kind of like whatever this. It's kind of like using Magic Bullet looks. It's not re-rendering every time. It's just taking that last frame and then updating one way or the other. Okay, that's good to know. I hadn't specifically done that before. All right, it's kind of few frames, not too much, but let's see what if we. First of all, we just have we never did a test of how quickly these flames are moving, so let's just see what that looks like. The speed on those aren't terrible. They're not terrible. We'd want more variation in it. I mean, doing it with a volume obviously would be a superior way of doing it, or a full-on particle simulation. But with these kind of just being a system that's automatically moving them on the edge, it's not terrible. I like that trail method, and considering it worked out of the box pretty well. I'm not displeased with it. What would be cool is like, especially depending on resolution, if there's like a little bit of bumpiness to the ground, like those could potentially roll up the ground and roll down, so you could actually be deforming the shape of the ground. Yeah, the flame speed, actually, I wouldn't really change it. I'm not sure what that giant flash is right there. I'm imagining that the overlays I did, at some point there's a something that can sneak out the top. A couple of those noises are probably like sneaking out just based on the overlays I did. And then, well, we can't view anything while this is rendering. That is one thing that Cinema Standard Renderer has and Physical Render has, is that we could have this rendering and still be doing work and rendering in the viewport. But this is like, well, nope, the Redshift renderer is engaged. Like, you just have to let it render. You can't go and do more rendering tweaks because you won't get any feedback on it. But yeah, I hadn't ever gotten the noise quite working here, but it probably just was. I didn't think that changing the material like that would require me doing a full refresh in the render view, but now we know. These are all very long and streaky, but we intentionally had set it up to be long and streaky. So let's just take another look at those real quick. And then we will be done with this one. In our material, we were feeding this cinema noise, and I have it stretched up 55, but we could probably go significantly less tall on it. Yeah, see, as soon as I lower that, you see how we start getting these like slightly more individualized little dots, and that instantly looks a lot better. And then potentially we could, you could increase this volume just by adding a few layers of fire could help. A solid band along the bottom could be a thing. Ultimately, like, this looks all right as a still, but ultimately, like, its lack of dimension forward and backward isn't going to be. It's not helping it. That's for sure. Having said that, let's try lowering the stretch even more. Yeah, see, like, actually, that's pretty cool too. So there's going to be a happy in between on that. I feel like our speed was pretty good, and you gotta be careful because I think you might start seeing a little uniformity there. As a still, that looks nice. And we didn't even look at any reference of fire, which obviously would be a good idea. But let's just, for the sake of it, because we've got, let's change the display mode to quick shading lines. I don't usually do quick shading, so I don't know the shortcut on that one. We could subdivide this several different ways. If we were doing it the viewport method, I could just keep on increasing this until we got a sizable subdivision. And what would be the way I would do this? I guess maybe putting a noise. We can probably put a cinema-based noise on it. And this is already a 2D noise. So make this smaller. And stretch it. Good. Oh, I thought that was 2D. It was the equivalent of 2D. Yeah, so you can see I'm starting to probably want to tile that a bit, but you see how I've got this like black and white image traveling around the entire thing. And then my thought was we could do a displacer fire, put that displacer in. The displacer is, let's save. This is looking at the, I guess it's a color channel of that material. And now you see it's displacing. So you can see the hope here is that this displacement would, and we could even probably give that some speed. Actually, yeah, there's animation speed on that. So we can give that a speed of 25. So as this is moving, this noise is stuck to it, but now we have an animation speed, so it's going to be kind of adding this volume throughout it. So that might help a lot pushing forward and backward. And that's just cinema. It's got nothing to do with a render. It's just changing the geometry. So that it could look terrible, but that might add a lot more depth to it. So yeah, see, it's a little more forward, a little bit more back. So it actually does fill it out a decent amount. I don't know how much better that would look in a render. And I guess just for the sake of learning, let me try hitting that gear. And is this tied into the camera one? Or is it apply the file output, apply post effect? So I'm assuming this isn't actually changing the camera. This is changing the this is changing like the Redshift post effect settings. That's interesting. Why is the histogram constantly updating? Oh, I guess the render is continuing, so that might be slightly tweaking things. We get to get some depth going, denoising. But yeah, there's all that stuff. Let's let it render a few frames again, just because I did that tweak. And we'll see if that fire, the length of the fire and a little bit of depth here helps. Could still be twitchy, could be bad, but that should be about it. Let's see. Yeah, Tobias, that's a good good reminder. Everybody, remember you can go join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. It looks like I'm doing a little too much depth there. We'd have to do several because I could feel, yeah, you can feel the geometry right now pushing in and out. The glow helps hide it, but there's definitely a lot of geometry pushing in and out. I don't feel like we were seeing that so badly when we were in that still, because that feels really janky right now, where I feel like in the viewport it was actually looking pretty good. Maybe it's just that it's smaller and it has my poly count is too tight when it's 100 frames earlier. Like, how much smaller are we? Yeah, the poly count, a small poly count could go a long way in that being different. It's pretty jittery too. I thought the noise would stick a little bit better. But yeah, it seems to get more stable as it goes up. I expect this to be a bit twitchier than I was hoping it to be. Not the worst. It's still pushing out. We'll give it a few more frames. But yeah, you should join the Rocket Lasso Slack. There's that link. I'll put it into YouTube as well. Boop. You think it's changing the camera tag as well? Let's find out. Exposure's on, but I was changing color management, wasn't I? I'm not sure what I was changing. Doesn't look like it changed, but I do not know such things. Let's see. Yeah, there could be more length in the tag, but it looked good in the still. But yeah, I mean, we're just playing. This is just one idea. Like, there's a million ways to do fire, and this is doing well. Even though I did it in a kind of weird, fancy way, it's not. You know, this is as opposed to doing it with particles. The entire thing could have been done with particles, and the entire thing could be done with volumes, and the entire thing could be. You could probably use fire images and have them all cloned along the edge. That'd probably be a pretty good methodology for doing that as well. But this was just our, like, hey, we're just going to build it and see what happens. So I'm not displeased with it for us just making it up. And yeah, I think we got pretty good scale on it. The speed and the scale is okay for just doing this type of gradient noise-based fire. Obviously, it's not the craziest, but... And then we could probably give the noise a decent amount of animation speed right now, because right now it's just traveling upward, but we could actually physically animate it, so it could evolve as it pushes up a bit. And, you know, it doesn't look terrible up close, and it doesn't look terrible far away, so you can't ask too much more than that. I feel like if there's a little bit more of a solid line on the bottom, right now the overlays didn't allow for a solid bottom, but the fall off near the top is all right. I'm not sure what this flare is right there, but it just might be the illumination because of the whole thing lining up. I'm not sure. But yeah, poly effects could potentially be used for flying bits where it could be looping. Like once they get a certain distance, they would just kind of pop back in and go. And yeah, to get some embers going. And also, like, we could, I don't know if it'd look better or worse because the glow would be lessened. Yeah, that's enough there. But let's throw an HDR in here because, like, our original reference, this is in the daytime. And there's a little bit of smoke, which obviously you'd have to do completely separately. But if we put this in the daytime, then like the illumination almost isn't a variable. Like the sun is so much brighter than anything this fire can do. It's kind of crazy. Look how perfectly that's moving. It's just like walking forward super uniformly. It's kind of crazy. But I guess just as a super duper final thing, I just want to put some daylight in here and see what that looks like. Save, Redshift, light, dome light, and then I can load in something. I do just have Grayscale Gorilla's HDR link handy, so we can just grab a daylight from there as a super quick HDR to grab. Ultimate Skies, no need to wait a long time, so I'll say give me preview mode, which is already still a very high resolution. And let's just grab a generic kind of overhead daylight. Daytime, go. Ooh, that looks cool too. The lights, I mean, it's kind of like a dusk-esque thing, but that extra illumination there doesn't look bad. And it definitely, I mean, it feels like a flame. I feel like a couple of layers, let those layer up a bit, get a little more animation speed. Like another hour of tweaking on this, I think it would be looking pretty good. It's not terrible as a still for the time we put into it. Speed, animation speed. Oh, animation speed, that's a very unintuitive number. If it's like cinema, then 2.5, maybe 5 would be what I'd want to put in there. And we got the height variation. Those are, like I said, these are still popping. These are popping a bit as it moves. I don't like all this jitteriness. And is that jitter? What is causing that jitteriness? The displacer. Yeah, see, that's not too. I guess it is a displacer because this is relatively smooth. Actually, it's quite smooth. And then this displacer is what is causing all the jitter. But I didn't think that this displacer would be doing that because we're applying a 2D noise across the entire thing. It's a very small noise though, so maybe that's what the problem is. It's a very. I was thinking that the noise wasn't small enough because we weren't seeing the pattern, but maybe it was. Let's see. No, not really. See, the image we're seeing here doesn't seem to be representative of what we're getting out of the displacer, but it's clearly this that's doing it. And we have animations. Dang it! I had animation speed of not 0.25, but 25. So it's just straight up the noise. I just put too much of a speed in it. So this can probably go back to being pretty small. Yeah, see now that's a reasonable wiggle. That's kind of what I'd want from a flickery fire effect. Yeah, see now that looks significantly better. Yeah, there we go. Yep, well, it's just a typo on my part. Or sometimes they do decimals and sometimes they do whole numbers. So that was a whole number mistake, and now we got something that looks coherent. I could probably displace things randomly upward as well, but let's just call that there. I'll just set it for a render as I say some goodbyes. To everyone, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. I guess I should swap the materials. Swap. And you can also type in, you can just type in gibberish into the polygon selection and the displacer will still see it, but now this does not have a selection tag of blah, 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 blah. So it won't render. So that's just a nice little tidbit there. Let's see. Yeah, thanks for the heads up. Thank you, Pierre and Tobias and Zach for little pointers in Redshift. And let's see, and Pierre. That should wrap this up. Like I said, looking forward to, we got 2 weeks until a new plugin comes out. I'm really, really looking forward to showing that off. And then next week should be a regular episode. I got lined up some guests, but you know, I don't mind doing a few episodes in a row without a guest. I mean, like I said, I intentionally had lined up a bunch of guests, and now I'm intentionally being like, okay, let's just do some regular episodes for 8-bit. But that should be good. And like I said, if you are supporting on Patreon, then you can get access to all the scene files I was just making. I'll have to be careful because I can't like give out that bridge material or anything, so I'll clean those up. But the I've got those gems and the diamonds and everything coming out soon, and then there's going to be discounts for the plugin when it comes out. If you're on Patreon, you'll have discounts automatically. So there's a bunch going on with that. But in any case, that should wrap this up. Let's just see how this render looks, and then it's only a few frames, but yeah, it's a little twitchy right now, just because it's only half a second worth of it. But the motion is working. It's traveling out, and it's not anywhere near as jittery as we had been. And we'll have an ever expanding circle of fire. So that is going to wrap this one up. I will see everybody for the bonus stream on Tuesday if you're around on Patreon for that. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday for the next regular episode. And yeah, that'll do it. So I'll see everybody then. Bye-bye.